Tragedy strikes for the first time underneath the new administration. How they dealt with it, what happened. Well, prayers out to all the families affected. Let's get right into it. This will be a short episode of We The Patriots Podcast. I am your host, Sal Assante. Thanks for joining. Here we go. Guys, this is an episode that not gonna lie, I wasn't really looking forward to doing. It wasn't in my plans, but in a way, I was planning on starting up at least 2 podcasts a week. This will be the second one this week, so I hope I don't make you guys tired of me, to be honest. Again, this has been in the works for a little bit here, so good opportunity to take advantage. Now, here's what happened. Here's what we're talking about today. If you don't know, there was a airline crash, and generally speaking, these make the headlines nowadays because, well, before my generation was around, airline crashes were, well, we'll go back into about the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Airline crashes were pretty common, much more common than they are today. FAA being created and becoming standardized, investigating every crash to its fullest so that it did not become headline news was one of the most important things to happen in the my hair is really messed up right now. Sorry about that. One of the most important things to happen in all of our history, really, our recent history anyway. And you look back, and over recent history, almost every single plane crash now is it's headline news, and there's nothing different about this one. So let's get into the facts a little bit. We had an airline, American Airlines flight, crash into an Army helicopter, and that was over the Potomac. This was January 29th, so we're talking about technically yesterday as I record this, but as you guys see it, this will be 2 days ago now. It was at night around 9 p.m., and the reason I didn't want to do a show last night was because there really wasn't too much out, and to be honest with you, there still isn't too much out. I can give you guys a baseline of the facts. So, number 1, no survivors found. Number 2, it's become, rather than a rescue, it's become a recovery operation, which means, again, no survivors are expected to come out of this, and full-on investigation from many different fronts. You're talking about military investigation as well as the FAA investigating what happened, and you had some instant reactions that I thought were not my favorite, I guess is the only way that I can put it. So let's talk about Trump's initial reaction here, because to me it was lackluster, to say the least. Trump's initial reaction was saying, of course, that it was tragic. His quote is "tragedy of terrible proportions," and this is according to Fox News and NPR. Now, what he also pointed out was that it was very preventable, which I would agree, that there was problems with the air traffic control. But one of the headliner quotes that's coming out of this, and I'm not going to direct quote him here, but he basically blamed it on DEI. And if you haven't seen too much of the wording coming out of the Trump administration, one of the biggest things that they're trying to focus on is getting rid of DEI. I believe they already signed an executive order getting rid of the Equal Opportunities Act under hiring. I could be getting that wording wrong, but essentially what's come out is that if you look at these laws, essentially what it did was give people either of color or of a different gender, possibly a different sexuality, a quote unquote equal opportunity for hire. But what it really did was open the door for things like DEI. And what DEI was, what it became, was essentially hiring a certain percentage base of different races, different genders, different ethnicities, and different sexual orientations in order to fill a quota, especially for large corporations. Getting rid of that, what the goal is, of course, is to, well, not of course, if you're struggling to understand, or if you think that it could be a racist policy, or if you think that it possibly could be heading backwards, is what I see a lot of people saying. What its goal is the way I understand it, is that you're trying to get back to a merit-based system, where you're going to get hired because you are the best person for the job. You're not going to get hired just because you're the right skin color, or you're the right race, you're the right gender, or you're the one gay person, right? Getting away from that, I think, would be a good thing. However, coming out in your first statement as the President of the United States and blaming this on DEI, blaming this on bad hires because of that reason, I think was short-sighted, because you have a great point. And what you could actually point to be honest, especially because he presided over the beginning of it, was COVID. COVID, basically all travel was restricted, especially airlines. And so people who worked in the airline industry, especially people who worked as air traffic controllers, went and found other jobs. So in order to get our airline industry back running, which is, if I'm not mistaken, is the largest airline industry any country, is the United States airline business. And it's why the margins are so slim. It's why companies, any accident like this can majorly affect that specific company that was involved, their profits and really their profitability looking forward. American Airlines is probably going to suffer for this for a long time. And to just point out the way that Trump did, kind of blaming a DEI hire, whether it would be from the Army's perspective and hiring a poor helicopter pilot that may have been, again, race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or blaming the air traffic control themselves, to be short-sighted. Unless you have information, me saying you being Donald Trump, unless Trump has access to information that the public just does not have access to at this point, that's a short-sighted comment, because I think you could very clearly point out again that during COVID, we had such a loss in these very skilled people who were very good at the job, specifically air traffic controllers. And because of that, you're looking at essentially a whole new swath of them across the nation. And of course, what's going to happen with that is you're going to have accidents. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have constant death or constant tragic accidents like we witnessed here on, would this be Wednesday. So that doesn't necessarily mean that air traffic controllers not being up to snuff as they were pre-COVID means that we're going to have accidents like this, but it does mean that we might get into some hairier situations. Now, how this is kind of playing out, how I'm seeing it is this is the first stress test of the new administration. And I think we're going to need a little bit more time, to be honest, in order to flesh out the facts, see who is at fault. One of the things is I will put up a picture or two of this throughout the show, but I don't think I'll put the video up. I don't want YouTube to flag it or say that I'm showing death or anything like that. So I will keep it somewhat a PG. But if you watch the video, which you can go and find, a flight path of the plane makes sense because they're landing. They're very close to reaching the destination. The flight path of the helicopter doesn't make too much sense. The one video that I saw, I cannot say that it was factual. It might have been, some AI generated audio or fake audio or audio from another instance, because allegedly those transcripts have not been released. Audio that I heard that went along with the video showing the crash had some sort of air traffic control essentially pointing out to the helicopter that there was a plane in the vicinity and to make sure that it went around into the back of the flight path rather than obviously flying straight into it. There was no correction. If you watch the video again, I don't think I'll link it either. You can go find it. Go look it up on X. Go look it up on whatever website that you want to find it on. You could see the plane is just coming straight. Looks like it's heading for a landing, and the helicopter is flying straight at the plane. Tragically, there was an explosion midair. Again, no survivors. What they're looking for now is just recovery, and they are not releasing the names, which I find interesting, not releasing the names at this point of the officials that were on this Army military helicopter, which makes one lead to think that possibly there were very high value individuals, could possibly have been non-military. The information I found is actually that they were, I'll actually pull it up here just to make sure I don't get this wrong. So it looks like it was 3 soldiers that were, all right. So allegedly the people involved were from the 12th Aviation Battalion flying out of Fort Belvoir. All right. So it is existing. It's interesting. I thought that they scrubbed the information, but they did not. So with that being the case, and if that does come out to be true, we're talking about just Army individuals or soldiers, and not that that's a better thing. However, I find it interesting, again, that they have not released who was on the craft. There's a lot of people being released, known figures that were on the airplane, one being figure skaters, hockey players or whatnot. Realistically, one of the most tragic things that we've witnessed in recent American history. Now, going back to many other instances, you think about the bridge that collapsed in or around Baltimore last year because of the failure of the, what was it? Just a Freightliner, some massive cargo ship. But anyway, comparatively, this is going to be much more tragic. Many more deaths involved and American lives at stake. And there has to be an investigation that gets to the bottom of this. Again, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this administration handles its first stress test here. I know there was mentioned quotes from the recently confirmed defense secretary, and that would be Pete Hegseth. You also have, because of this incident, Trump immediately appointed a new head of the FAA. His name right now, he named Christopher Rochelieu. Definitely butchering that. It's a French last name there, so my apologies on that front. But because the incident was an immediate appointment, and yeah, it's just going to be interesting what actually comes out of it, if there's, any firings or what goes on. However, one of the things that's been talked about, I would say relatively a lot, I definitely didn't say that right, but one thing that's been heavily spoken about has been the fact that we are in dire need of air traffic controllers. I know I've seen lots of job postings about it, and you have to go through some pretty rigorous training. And I think this is going to be a wake-up call to the FAA that we need to get back on our game here as America and our flight industry, because again, this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, around the world. And having this as a representation, and we're now going on, 10 days in office for Trump? Not a great look. Now, again, I think the big problem was the reaction. Unless he has access to information on this, which obviously he should have access to more information than any of us plebes would have, but it is a little bit concerning to see that this bad of a problem occurs this quickly into the administration, and the blame gets cast on DEI before, well, in my opinion, just blaming, if you're going to blame anybody, and he did point out the tragedy before he went to blame, immediately going to blame a DEI hire, blaming someone being hired for inappropriate reasons, without any good information on that, I think that that's a mistake. I want to hold Trump's feet to the fire. I want to hold the whole administration's feet to the fire, as well as anybody who might have been, here flying either of the aircraft, whether it be people flying the plane, pilots of the plane that may have seen the helicopter ahead of time and didn't course correct, or vice versa, people on the helicopter not listening to air traffic control, which seems like, again, I can't confirm that the audio that I heard was accurate or real from that incident, but it seems like they disregarded orders. And if that's the case, then all blame is to fall on the pilot of the helicopter, who is now dead. Everybody in the situation is no longer alive. And yeah, this is just a really, really tragic incident. Pray out to all the families who lost loved ones here, because it is a lot of families. One thing to be thankful for, if you're thankful for anything, was that this was not a full 747 jet. Seems like the total capacity of the plane was somewhere around 68 people and 4 people flying the helicopter, 3 of them being soldiers. It does not make anything better. However, I think it is better in comparison to how bad it could have been. Now the onus is going to be on the investigation to see what we come up with and see who's to blame. That's all I really got for you guys today. Again, this is going to be a short episode, kind of an emergency podcast, but going forward, I think I'm going to go for about 2 episodes a week, start pre-recording some shows, and to look ahead to the episode next Monday. We're going to be talking about some pretty serious stuff. Give you guys a little bit of a teaser here. I don't want to totally blow it away, but what we'll be talking about is the relatively recent, if you're looking at the entire history of the United States, the relatively recent change from laws and policy being enacted, rather than utilizing all forms of government, utilizing almost strictly executive action. How that came about, just how prevalent it actually is, as well as where that came from and what kind of connections we may see in history in terms of maybe this isn't the healthiest thing for America. How our forefathers may have viewed the changes that we're now seeing over 250 years after the institution of the United States. Without any further ado, I'm going to let you guys go. I will catch you guys next week, and you guys have a blessed week and stay safe out there. I love you all. It's been Sal Assante with We The Patriots Podcast. Peace out.
I want to be something, not nothing. Trapped inside my dream and I'm running away from these demons. But the feeling's so good, I'ma keep dreaming.